Rebel Devs Podcast, a show that challenges conventional thinking in the tech industry. Each episode features conversations with solutionists who have taken unconventional approaches to problem solving, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in their respective fields. Join the Devolution.
Hey, Rebel Dev listeners. We're back here for another fun and exciting episode. I have, as always, Jonah May with me. How you doing today, Jonah?
I'm doing pretty well. Enjoying the cooler weather here that's finally coming to Texas.
Sweet. And we have a guest today with us. We have Byrne from Veeam. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic, Thomas. And just heard you said it's getting a little bit chilly in Texas. Well, we got snow falling on the ground right now. First day of the year.
Ooh, and where are you out of exactly? Remind me.
Edmonton, Alberta, up in lovely Canada. Your brother's from
Canada.
the north.
Awesome. I actually have a fun Canada story. Jonah kind of knows this, but we went across with some Boy Scouts so we could do the Boundary Waters to Atikokan Base, and I couldn't tell you where that is. But as we're going into the country, the fun part was this was a day that President Trump decided that he was going to be really mean to Trudeau. And as we're at the border, they're all just like not happy with us Americans. And I'm bringing a bunch of Boy Scouts in, and they refuse entry into the country for me. And they go through this whole, like, we can see this whole thing in your background and we won't tell you what it is. And it turns out it's actually a ticket that in Texas, when you kind of get tickets, you can defer them. And if you're good, they don't ever hit your record. Well, they opened it, but they didn't close the deferment. So they were like, well, we don't know what this is. You can't come in. They made me a 7-day temporary citizen of Canada, or a guest. I don't know what you would say. And so for 7 days, I was Canadian, and then I had to check back out of the border. So it was kind of hilarious. So every now and then those Boy Scouts will be like, the good old motherland, if you will, Canada, as I like to call it. But yeah, so a little bit of heritage there, not real. We do have some French Canadian in our blood. So fun Canada story, but I always like to joke it's a whole other country, as Forrest Gump would say.
That's true. That's true.
Well, we're going to jump in and pay the bills. And those of you joining us today, we always do 2 episodes with our guests. We like to have one that pays the bills. So we're going to go Veeam, and we're going to say Salesforce.com and M365 and all these cool things that our marketing people can go ahead and SEO and bling out and make us happy. And then we're going to have the fun conversation. So if you're listening to part 1, stay for part 2, where we're going to talk a little bit more of the passions of Rick. And we're going to learn about Yorkies, Rocket League, and maybe even talk some USB-C, which is an interesting, weird little grouping. But that's why we're here, because we're different. So let's jump in a little bit, Rick. We were talking about things that we'd like to discuss about Veeam, and I always like to push the envelope and go, can we just not do the same webinar we all do? Like, we get immuted storage, we get resiliency and stuff. And you came up with this cool idea of kind of talking about siloed products and why that's better than just having this single pane of glass, single product. So, riff with us a little bit. What's your thought process here with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm the star of this messaging or not, and if everybody would always agree with me on it for a fact, but I could definitely have a nice little devil's advocate conversation about it. And my whole take is it's better to have products that are built from the ground up without a lot of technical debt that you incur as a product's being built, especially depending on time, year, what exists at that point in time, and be able to build a product that's best suited for what actually exists in the time, and then go back to a platform that can connect together for at least monitoring and reporting on that side. So what's your take on that?
We always hear we want single pane of glass. And the reality is, I think as we support the products, we really do find, like any product, while it might be a single pane of glass, there's always different teams doing it anyway. And that's their specialty. And I kind of like the idea of having some separate outside of the monitoring and reporting, like you said, as we look at managed service provider console, Veeam One, that brings it all together, Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, bringing it back together. But I kind of do like the breakouts, honestly. I think it's easier to scale it out. But Jonah may have a different opinion than us because, he kind of gets down in the trenches a little bit more and gets grumpy as he has new installs. Where are you in this?
Don't hold back.
Well, I was going to say, here we go. Hot take is the Veeam Cloud and Service Provider. Ready? Separate products are great, but integrations are better. So that way, as a service provider, I can offer more capabilities to my customers, such as, some gaps we see today are I can send some public cloud workloads if they're VMs to a Cloud Connect provider, but not the others like databases or file shares.
I think that leads us into kind of where Veeam has come to maturity years ago. And I think we can all talk about this because I think we were all around. I don't know if you were quite there yet, Jonah, but do we all remember how long it took to go from 9 to 10? Like, it was
never. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And it was like, this feature's going to be in there, so let's delay. And finally, Veeam was like, listen, we got to cut this back. And I can't say that you're an agile shop, but you're definitely doing minimal viable product. You're doing sprints and stories and short hops. And man, that makes it so much better in the reality. So, Jonah, I can hear what you're saying, but I really go with something is better than nothing. At least we can protect a sales force, even if we're not 3-2-1-ing it. We're at least going to move the needle over in my mind. Whereas if we waited for a fully mature product, I don't know that it would ever hit market. God's honest truth. I just can't see it.
Yeah, we'd be back to that exact same scenario we did see live and breathe, where finally, version 11 kind of took care of most of that was sitting on the table from back at version 9 days. I still remember that Veeam on.
Oh, yeah. It was great because I actually remembered something like, at one point, they were like, tape is going to be this thing. And as a service provider at the time, I was like, we were taping already, but we had to write our own UI. We had to write all these APIs, and it was tedious. And they're like, now you can do this. And we're like, yes. And they VMom'd it. And then it never hit the release. And it was like, what in the good Lord was this? Like, I needed that. Tape is the bane of my existence. Everybody says, do we tape? And I think it comes up on every show. And I'm like, yes, you should tape, but I hate it so much. But it is your most resilient, lowest cost, immuted storage, truly air gap. So yeah, I definitely felt that. So, I mean, Jonah, do you remember Office 365? And before it was M365, it was O365, and I don't know what it's called anymore. I guess M365. But do you remember those days? Oh, is it VB365 now? Guess who doesn't sell SKUs, ladies and gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, hey, you wouldn't be the only one. Trust me, it's an uphill struggle of people constantly referring to it under the old name.
I'm just like, protect it, please, and it works. Like, I guess we don't even
The
say.
problem is, the other companies changed their names too, because it used to be Veeam Backup for Office 365.
Yeah.
Then Microsoft changed it to Microsoft 365. And instead of calling it VBM 365, just in case they change it again, we just stuck with VB 365 for Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365.
Oh, yeah. And Microsoft never changes anything, those APIs, nothing, Why is it broken?
Intra ID, I mean, hey.
Oh, yeah. And I remember when it first came out, like Jonah and I, we took the first versions of it and we started figuring out how's this going to work in the cloud world. So we worked with like Mike Resler and those guys, and we were like, what does this look like in a cloud wide scale development? And we felt the pains of, I remember it was a Jet database at first, and it was like, oh my gosh. But as working with Mike, he was like, no, now it's going to go object storage. And we were able to work with these developers who were bringing the product. They were so specialized. It was awesome to be able to give them those feedback loops and work. And if the listeners aren't aware, really what's awesome about the Veeam support structure is, like, I tell every customer, so different dev does professional services. And the first thing I coach somebody, I'm like, I don't care if you pay me to fix your problems. I need you to open a Veeam ticket, as dumb as that sounds, so we can start tracking it. Because, once we have that Veeam ticket, we're hitting the forums, which are getting the developers. We're hitting the community in there. And even if we finally move into a product team, they need those ticket numbers. So that's one of the frustrations I know end users have with Veeam is, man, I got to open this ticket. What is it doing? It's tracking. So as we started tracking and working with Mike and that team, it was so awesome because every one of those groups came into play. But as we were talking about that specialization, Mike's team was so awesome to really get things moving and shaking. And to think that behind the scenes, it's just one big team working together. It's crazy to ever think that. So I kind of do appreciate it. And I think it's a little bit of honesty. And also, in my experience, I should add this caveat. I like the fact that as you have separate products, if one thing breaks, it really breaks that. It doesn't break everything. I think if we hooked it all in at the same time, like, could you imagine a world where you're taking a replication job, you're kicking it off site, but for some reason something's jamming the VBR with Salesforce or something, and now everything is broken. Like, that would be so horrific. At least now it's like, listen, bug fix, do whatever, work on this. And I'm not saying it's a Veeam bug, but I mean, anything could ripple through with this. A Salesforce API changes, doesn't work. Now everything goes out? No. So,
well, that's what we're seeing a lot of the case around Microsoft 365, whether it's AWS, Google Cloud, the list goes on. It's not our product that typically changes to cause a problem. It's usually an API that we leverage to communicate to XYZ that has changed that now breaks something. Now, do you want us to have to update our entire code set of Veeam backup and replication, get out the door, or even deliver a hotfix when we can specifically target that one application and that one API that's leveraged, right?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the number of VB365 hotfixes that have had to be issued in the last few years. I mean, it seems to have gotten better in the last year or two, but it seemed like there was a good chunk there during COVID where it was like every 2 to 3 weeks, Microsoft would break an API on the software.
Well, and that's why I always told people, even beyond just the sensibility of backing up your environment somewhere else, like, my conversation to customers have always been like, I love M365. Like, once this came out, I could stop being an Exchange administrator. I could go clickety click and the stuff worked. The problem is I'm now a cog in a very large machine when things break. Will I really get the face time to do something? And so, out of diligence, I always wanted something outside of their ecosystem. Not that I'm going to spin up an Exchange box, but in theory, if everything went awry at Microsoft, right, I could go ahead and suck these PSTs out. I could pop them into Exchange on-prem. I could do something to get things moving here. And that added so much value to it. And knowing that, okay, I have other means to back it up. I know that when we talk about Veeam, we kind of think of, VBR as that traditional team. I think that's a phrase you said to me at some point, Rick. I mean, what do we mean when we think about VBR as traditional versus these other teams? Like, what's the difference with them, if you will?
Yeah, traditional, and the way I look at it, everything that we consider traditional backup, whether that's virtual machines from VMware, Hypervisor, Hyper-V, AHV, looking at Linux, Windows agents, so on and so forth, database backups, file-based backup, that's where all the traditional type of backups go to. Where more the modern and cloud-based workloads are being built as separate entities outside of Veeam backup and replication, but they plug back as that platform. So again, you get that at least visibility to reporting and a good chunk of configuration even within Veeam backup and replication as that main control plane. But at the same time, you're not losing the functionality of building a product around an operator, because a Kubernetes administrator is totally different than a Linux administrator versus a Salesforce administrator versus an M365 administrator down to a VMware administrator. You see where I'm going with that?
Oh, I am. I actually was involved with a partner that came to us and said, could you go ahead and implement a Salesforce for us? And we're like, sure, we can do that. And then they started asking us, well, what about cost-based quoting, CBQs? And the partner was like, I have no idea if we back this up. I went back, Jonah and I started scurrying, and we're like, we're not even seeing documentation on this. And we're having to traverse through a lot of people that are at Veeam going, well, it should do that. And they're like, you should test that. And I'm like, well, but this partner's trying to sell this deal, and the customer won't buy it if it's not. So who's going to get stuck labbing it? Till we came up into the actual Salesforce community at Veeam, and it was like, that team was like, yes, we see that as an object. You might not see it in the GUI, but we can do some API calls back to get it. And we were like, great. And they're like, it's roadmapped in future edition. No time applied. Anybody listening? I mean, if it's not in there now, I'm not giving you a time, but it's roadmapped out there. There's not insider
It'll be ready when it's ready.
Exactly. But it was like, wow, look at that. And again, how do we do it? Funny thing, Rick, it was like open ticket, post to forum. And at one point the partner's like, look, somebody's asking this question. And I was like, yeah, that's like Jonah and I in the forums asking that question. You're literally quoting ourselves. We're in a circular loop here. Like, let's break out of it. And it's hilarious. Whenever you're talking professional services or consulting, somebody's like, why are you posting in the forum? And I'm like, because the Veeam community, that's where us vanguards and legends are out there for a reason. But you're getting guys out there in the product teams actually going in there. And, Anton's whole team is out in there looking at it, which is what I love about it. But these diverse teams coming together in the community, and I love it. And then, I mean, there's a little bit something special too. I mean, you mentioned Kubernetes, right? Like, this was an acquisition. You know, it's like Cirrus is a acquisition. So as a company grows bigger, we know you're not going to build it from the ground up. I mean, you're building the pieces, but sometimes you're going to grow by acquisition. Microsoft has done it. Everybody, Cisco, whoever. Now Veeam's doing it. And it only makes sense that as you bring these teams in, while you're going to assimilate them, you really can't break the Kubernetes team out. Like Michael Cade's team is not just going to, you know, be dropped into every little team everywhere. Why would we do this? Why not just keep them together and let them turbocharge what they're doing? And I'm excited because I know next week I'm personally going to a presentation by Michael out in Prague for Kubernetes. And I'm excited because while I have it on a high level, I can tell you, I'm like, I understand containerization and what we can do. It'll be really exciting to hear from the source, to hear this is what you want to go. So,
1,000%.
Absolutely. Jonah, are you attending that Kasten session also, or did you play hooky?
You're talking the Monday workshop or the breakout
the Sunday
session?
There's a special Sunday session, I think, that
yeah, I'm attending that one. I'm not, unfortunately, making the what's coming in the next version because due to scheduling conflicts, they had to put some service provider exclusive stuff at the same time. So I'm missing that and what's coming in Salesforce. But I'm hoping someone else goes that'll take notes for me.
Well, I'll be in the same sessions you are because I said, please put me into the cloud provider side since we support so many cloud providers and whatnot out there. But it's exciting. I will say the other thing that I love about the specialized teams is as we get into the lesser used products, it's been nice to find that specialization. Like as we've backed up GCP, we found that it wasn't a high adopted product. It just really wasn't. It's there. It's an option, but nobody was really there. And we had to traverse up some levels on a low adoption rate. And I hate to say it, but sometimes you feel like you're the beta tester out there because you're doing the real world examples that a lab just can't bring about. And it was nice to have those teams. So I like it. And I know that as we get out there, when we bring in Veeam 1 and we bring in these other products, we do get that holistic view out there. And something that Jonah and I have both done at various points is written custom reporting. I mean, a lot of what we do, interestingly, is making it under the same pane of glass. You have guys like Jorge de la Cruz that's writing some great Grafana dashboards. You have us doing certain things, creating our own wrapper services, pulling in, creating Postgres databases and putting stuff up and going, here's customer portals. Here's a report that you want from multi-sourcing. And what's great is every time these products come out, there's always this API guide, which is great. It's being smart enough to know nobody's going to really want that same pane of glass either. Like what I like, what you like will be different. And more I find where I go to Veeam and I'm like, have you thought about this? And they're like, well, yeah, but that's why you have an API, write it yourself. And I think more and more people have to understand they're going to want a custom view. I don't think a Veeam 1 is ever going to do everything you want it to do. It'll aggregate the data to death. It'll give you the APIs, but to get that exact report you want, that's so hard to write for everybody. And I don't know, maybe version 15 will have a custom report writer. Who knows? Beyond.
Well, and I mean, there's some things we don't want to take away from great individuals like yourself because it is that value you can add and build with the expertise you have and the connectivity you have within our organization. I mean, we don't have all these separate pods to add to complexity. It's the total opposite. We want it to be as least complex as possible. But also, did you ever go to a city without GPS?
Yeah.
Or a map?
Yeah.
You are that GPS. Maybe we'll call you Siri. I don't know. But you can help guide and point in the right directions to those interesting point of views, right? Or that, hey, you want the best burger? I know where that is. That's why you exist to help with that. And I hope we never get to the point where we don't have individuals like you, both of you, helping within the community to drive those efforts forward, right?
Well, I mean, even talk about Cirrus right now. I know it's a real hot button in the channels. Like the channels are exploding of you've basically, stabbed us, Veeam. And I sat back and I looked at it. And my first was like, oh my good Lord, I'm glad I'm not so much on the cloud provider side as I once was. Jonah is very much knee deep into that with Cyber Fortress. And we both kind of looked and were like, oh, good Lord. But it's that value add. So I went back in my history years, probably like version 4 or 5 of Veeam. We were like, great, Veeam's on-prem. We need to get it to the cloud because we were a cloud provider in DR before Veeam was really into that whole thing. And we were using like Falcon Store and StorageCraft. And even there, we were bringing it into the cloud. We were DRing it. And we knew that Veeam was going to be the right engine, but it wasn't there. Well, at some point in there, Cloud Connect birthed. And I remember my board at the time was just like, wait, this was our value add. What are you doing? Like, this is terrible. Should we run away and go another route? And it was like, well, wait. They're going to be able to fix all the bugs that I haven't been able to do. They're going to maintain that code base. And where am I bringing the value add? It's still the same value add. It's that personal knowledge that we have. Whereas Cirrus is a great product for somebody that might have said, I want to run up to AWS or I want to go to Azure straight. Hey, this is a better entry point over there. Yeah, I know it's only Azure now, but who knows what the future would ever hold. I'm just, speculating over here that whatever it becomes, it's still self-service. And your self-service customer is always going to be a self-service customer, but they're going to hit walls. And Veeam support can only take you so far. Even if you were to go to Cirrus, and I think this will kind of segue into our next discussion point is, even if you are like, I'm the biggest Cirrus customer ever, Veeam, give me support. Veeam support is just that. It's support. It's not architecture. It's not design. It's really, you could do some specking out. And I know we're going to kind of segue here. I think it's a good point to go pre-sales versus post-sales. Like, they're just a different world. And I think Veeam does a great job pre-sales. Sometimes there's this hard shift to help the customer understand there's not really that post-sales engineer. In the past, that was you, customer, but you are overloaded. So that's where you start looking to a cloud provider. We have Cyber Fortress here with Jonah. It's like, go to another cloud. If you're not in the cloud, they're going to get you there. Cirrus is great for self-serve, but you know what? Cyber Fortress is going to DR test you. They're going to immute you. They're going to do all these things. While Cirrus may offer some of those, the onus is on you. You're getting a bench team to go. When you come to a different dev, you know what? I was like, great, Cirrus, cool. Everybody, it's awesome. I'm going to offer it, not to sell it, because I only do pro services, but you need help getting there? Fine, call me. I will help you. Most likely, the conversation is going to look something like this, I would get, is, hey, it's doing most of what you need. It's not doing it all. There's really a better solution for you. Are you going to go to your own data center, or have you even realized that a Cyber Fortress exists? Because I know customers that come to me from Azure, and they're sitting out here and they are trying to configure the daylights out of it, and they are just stumped. And I'm like, why are you beating your head? Either get a Veeam person like us to help you, or, man, you've got a big spend. Man, there are other options here. Not that I want to pull away from Microsoft. If you're leveraging your Microsoft credits and you're happy, be there. But some folks are just like Googling it, and the first thing that came up was, we can do this. And they don't understand the complexity. So your value add is right. But let's talk a little bit more about pre-sales and post-sales engineers, because I think this is up your alley, Rick. Like, I think you might have something to say on this. There's some experience here.
Yeah, let's start off with, my background. I was in IT operations, so I was the guy in the data center doing the stuff, and I got dragged into sales, a little bit of kicking and screaming way back when, but it was into a startup company at that time, which was Veeam, and we're going back, we were, it wasn't at the pure startup time, but we're going back about 11 years ago, so a fair amount of time before, what I would consider we were in that startup space. And Veeam at that point in time, pre-sales and post-sales is very blended together. When you're a startup company, that's a very blended type of thing, because you don't have a post-sales ecosystem. You don't have much of a channel developed at that point in time. So you really go down that journey. So it really got me thinking as the time went, and where I came from an operations background, being a Veeam administrator, backup administrator, period, virtualization, it was very easy for me to gravitate that way. But as time goes, pre-sales and post-sales really starts to divide apart from each other. Pre-sales more about having a discussion and figuring out, okay, how can I help you, Mr. Customer, or Mr. Channel, or Mrs., however that comes true. But it's about the discussion on how can we solve a challenge you may be facing, or a challenge you didn't even know you had. Then once that gets resolved, then you start to go down that post-sales route, and then you get into implementation and operational and standing it up. But then you're getting into the speeds and feeds, more into less conceptual and logical type of architecture, and down to that physical architecture layer where every single dot makes a difference. So it is a big challenging thing to get over. And I've been heavily focused on pre-sales, I'll say over the last 6 or 7 years, where I've been dedicated to that and really honing in onto it, leaving from a pre-sales engineer role into a solution architecture role into an SE manager today on the pre-sales side. So everything I look at is from a pre-sales angle today, not a post-sales. And I'll just leave that there for any type of questions, comments, concerns.
No, I appreciate that breakdown. That's a great run through. One of the cornerstones, I think, of different devs businesses, we were very specific and strategic to not sell any Veeam. Whereas as a customer, sometimes if I'm using a pre-sales engineer, those guys are really, keyword, sales. They're looking for opportunity in there. And I'm not saying they're going to sell you something you don't need. More often than not, and I appreciate this about Veeam, when I walk in and say, I need this high level SKU, I need Veeam 1, I need Orchestrator, and they're like, wow, that's going to be a big expense for the customer. And a lot of customers don't need that. And they really start talking them down. And I'm like, no. If I'm engaged in the conversation, I'm telling you, they do need this. There's a different use case there. And I've always appreciated that about Veeam. But sometimes those little voices in the back of my head start chattering. And it's like, is this person just trying to upsell me? And this is me as a customer. Like, are they upselling me? So from my side, we've built our entire business around, we're not going to skew it out. So if I say you need something, I want you to think that I'm pure. There's no kickback. There's no, I'm getting a piece of the licensing action. Oh, I'm selling some Exagrid object first, fill in the blank. Like, there's nothing here. Yep. And so you get that independence in there. And so I think it even stretches beyond Veeam, is always being aware of where you are. And I'll also say, in my experience, these sales engineers are great for a point in time. They've looked at your environment, they've used Veeam 1, they've gathered it, they've spec'd what you need. But when it comes to that implement, it does morph a little bit. So many times we're brought in after Veeam's been there, after a partner sold the license, they have their own engineers, and we get in there and we're just like, hey, somebody shifted focus. Jonah, do you remember customer not named one time? I had to call you because they went to Linux hardened repositories instead of putting them everywhere. They wanted a centralized hardened Linux. And it was like, whoa, flag on the play. I've not seen that. Remember that whole deal?
Well, yeah. And I think what it came out to was hardened Linux repositories were fairly new at the time. Something was missed in the documentation. They were trying to do a VBR at every remote site, but have the one at the central office act as both the primary backup repository for the main office and a secondary target for each of those other VBRs. But if you're not familiar with hardened repositories, you can't target multiple VBRs to the same hardened repository. So I think you ended up morphing them to a centralized Veeam server running proxy and repository roles at each of the remote offices.
Well, exactly.
With the backup Veeam ISO on one of the proxy servers, which was kept Windows. That way, if the inter-office link were ever down, they could just install Community Edition, map to the backups locally, and restore everything.
But see, there's your post and pre, right? The pre guys did their job. When we did this was like new. Like, it was like, there's this thing called Linux repositories, and somebody locked in and sold it. And so maybe they didn't have all their engineering. It went through a couple different inside Veeam, outside Veeam, just partner system. It was just mixed. And really, if you look at the documentation in their defense, there's like a one-liner in there that's like, you can't do it this way. But on our post side, we were smart enough to know, well, the customer's going to have a little pain point if we make this shift to say, wait a minute, what happens if I lose my connection to my main Veeam server while I'll have a local repository with backups? What am I going to do? And we were like, hey, let's just get a Windows box over here. Let's get the ISO for Veeam loaded, and we can import the backup and go. And it just took it down a thread. And while it kind of sounds a little bit complicated or not, let me take it to the financial side. We went from a customer realizing that they couldn't have Linux repositories at each site. They would have to buy more hardware, which they couldn't, to centralizing it in a management nightmare and additional licensing and purchases to be able to go, no, we don't need to do that. Listen, let's just retool a little bit. And I would never think that a pre-sales engineer would ever trip across the feasibility of, oh man, what happens if I lose my proxy at each site? What will I do because of my RPO? How will I get that back when they're built up on traditional backup jobs? So a lot of moving pieces there. And so we're kind of the guys in the room, I think. As we look to the Veeam guys, we say they're really great at designing things. They're really good at doing it. When you kind of get some field experience like Jonah on your cloud side, I mean, how many times are you failing customers over to a secondary location?
Fairly often. I mean, I've got some restores, maybe not even just a failover, but I've got restores running on a second monitor now for a customer. We're DR testing their Cloud Connect backups.
Yeah, so you kind of get through there. I myself spent a career of being the guy in the room going, oh, geez, this thing has happened, and we haven't had tech. Before a muting was there, I like to share the story. There was a school district that called to us, and everything was deleted out of their repository in Veeam, local and remote. And we're trying to figure out what the heck is going on here. How are they? And we realized they penetrated into Veeam. They deleted everything. And we're like, oh my gosh. So we're trying to figure out for all of our customers, kind of like Hive knowledge, how do we protect our other customers if one person did this? Well, simultaneously, Veeam's already moving towards insider protection, which they developed. We had to develop our own product line. And then eventually when Veeam came around, we could scale it back some. But seeing that, that's not something a pre-sale. So we kind of bring a little bit different knowledge base in there. But what's really cool is, while I guess I said pre versus post, I really should kind of bring it back to Rick. I know when I work with people from your team, I tend to find things and I bring it back to your team and I'm like, hey, I found this. I think we need to do this. Can you guys help architect? And then you guys kind of pick it up and do your pre-sales thing for something I found in post. It's almost like a cyclical nature, I think. Is that a good
100%? Yeah, that's like spot on, because everybody will always ask us when a new product comes out, like, where's your best practices? And again, I come from a solution architecture background as well. I go, we don't have any best practices yet because our best practices come from the field, which comes from our channel and our vast partners and our different legends and programs we have out there, and just word of mouth through the field when we're out talking to a customer about what they experienced. So we have to wait for a little bit of soak time to get those identical best practices that are specifically beneficial to be implemented. Just like you said, when you said, hey, we did this thing, and then, Veeam came out with insider protection. Well, we probably did the thing because we've seen people like yourself building these things for insider protection. And we're like, okay, this could be built into our product, just like immutability and the hardened repository. Same type of concept, just like, MFA. And hey, some people are on the fence about MFA. Does it really matter if your entire main architecture got attacked anyways? Does MFA really keep you protected if you got that low level of attack? No, not really. But these are, again, best practices that we learn and try to work around to say, okay, well, we're not saying keep it off domain, but it should be on a different domain or maybe a work group. But if you're a bigger customer, more enterprise scale, that should be off in a resource domain, and specifically for your backups and your critical services, instead of keeping everything on one domain, because if that one domain gets impacted, but again, that's things we learn from the field. The same thing as, I may be dating when this gets released or not, but, very, very soon, we're going to have our Veeam on resiliency event come out with a lot of things that we've learned from best practices from the field that's going to be implemented in 12.1 to help with conquering ransomware, at least from the backup and data protection stance.
No, you're right. And this,
right? So,
this,
hold on, Thomas.
No, and this will release after the Resiliency Summit. So we're recording before, it'll drop after. But I know Jonah and I will both be attending, but I'm with you. Like, again, it's been so much communication. I used to tell people, so when I started in this, we were still file level backups. We were a file level backup company. I helped form this company and grow it. And we moved the needle from file level, which is when I came in, to really jumping up into what you call DR, before DR was a thing. And we would find different things out there. It's funny, you said a resiliency domain or a resource domain. That is like the number one thing we recommend to customers, because I know that there was this very large construction company that came to us one time, and they're like, don't disclose who we are, of course, but they're like, they came in and they hit our Hyper-V hosts. It didn't matter what we had in. They just got admin rights and they deleted everything. And we were like, oh my gosh. And now we have local Linux hardened repositories, because we went back to Veeam and we're like, how could we prevent this? Like, we knew breaking it out to a domain would be the logical step. But who would have ever thought to do that back in the day? Because it just wasn't a thing. It was like they would come in, they would ransom you. You'd be like, ha, 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 I have backups. Well, they stopped getting paid. So what did they do? They have to find that next vector and that next vector and that next vector. And I really do appreciate the landscape now, because I've said this for years and people got really mad at me, where I would say, you will be penetrated. You will be hacked. You will be hit. Whatever words you want. So you better minimize your risk. Let's not make it stupidly easy, but let's have this failover plan. And this, I hope, comes out of the summit is, I've always said, to a degree, we're selling insurance. I feel like an insurance salesman, Rick, when I go in. I'm like, everyone you know and love will die. Blood will spill everywhere. Buy my product. And everybody's like, no, you overreact. They make a purchase. Take the customer who just went through a ransom. Suddenly the checkbook is open. They're like, please, God, anything. And at least in my due diligence, I try to make sure when I speak to customers, I want to make sure that you make a decision. So if you make the decision that could turn out to be wrong, you didn't make the wrong decision because you didn't know. You strategically chose that. So it was a risk mitigation. It's not going to be like, oh man, didn't I tell you that you could go over to Cyber Fortress over there and you could do insider protection and you'd be fine. Hey, you could go to Wasabi. Oh, I should have told you that. Like, how frustrating is that? I'd rather say, have you thought about this over here? Go to Cyber Fortress, get DR tested, get insider protection. You're good to go. And you're like, no, Wasabi's great over here. They have it muted. Yeah, but they're not testing you. So now are your backups good? Well, you're not testing. You didn't sure backup. You didn't whatever. Education. Yep. So absolutely. So, all right. I think we've paid the...
And it's not building up the world of the whole trusted advisor stance. And I know that's a buzzword and we can play vendor bingo, but it is truly being that trusted advisor. I know Veeam pays me and you guys are from Cyber Fortress, different dev, and that's, of course, all of our companies, but we truthfully don't want to see people impacted by ransomware, extortion, or anything of that nature. We want to see the criminals go down, but we all have to do it together. And when we're actually being more secure and they're being less successful, they will stop. They'll go find somebody else to bug to try to get their money. But if we can all come together and join those forces, we'll be a better world together. Right.
Oh, I agree. And I like to tell people my experience with Veeam. I've used many other products, and now I bleed green. I like to say there's nothing else we do at Different Dev except for Veeam. And the reason being is prior to Veeam, it used to be like, oh my gosh, will it recover? And then if you were in the middle of a catastrophe, oh, well, you don't have the right support level. And so you'd give them as much money as you could. And these other vendors would always have some excuse why they couldn't. The crazy thing is at Veeam, I've never encountered an we can't sort of thing. Even if we're like pushing the hardest case ever, you're watching these guys you see in webinars and video series actually jumping in and working with you. Where else do you get the developers working? And that's what I love about Veeam. When you say kind of we're in this all together, we really all are. And we take it very seriously. So I think we've paid the bills, but I'm going to give you all your closing comments and then we'll kind of play out and, you know, make sure we stay for part 2, which is all going to be about the fun side of the world. And who cares about paying the bills at this point? We could be normal people. So, Jonah, any closing thoughts, comments, anything? Shameless plug for Cyber Fortress. Make the marketing people happy be there.
Yeah, shameless plug for Cyber Fortress and talking a little bit about the summit. I am hoping, I have not played around too much with the betas yet that I've received as a Vanguard, but fingers crossed, you know, there's a lot of good stuff coming that's being announced at this summit. And I'm hoping in our talks of integrations and stuff, they find a way to tie it back so maybe us service providers can report that and add it to our portals as part of our value add, but we'll see.
So things are coming at the summit. Are you talking the Vanguard Summit or are you talking the Resiliency Summit? Which one? Because both are kind of...
Both.
Oh, both. Okay. Very good. So go ahead, check out Cyber Fortress. Those guys are good at what they do. We send a lot of business their way because, you know, when you're failing over, you actually want somebody who knows what they're doing. Not saying other partners don't, but I know I like to have a namesake over there. And so it's easier for me to call this gentleman with the same last name as me to get it done. But I've worked with their team for years. It's a great group of people. They'll protect you everywhere. And, awesomeness over there. Rick, anything you want to add before we start having some fun in our next episode?
Well, like anything, I mean, keep it secure out there. Think about how you can do the right thing to make sure your data is protected.
Awesomeness. Well, folks, that's the end of our part 1 where we've had a lot of fun talking about Veeam and siloing. I encourage you to check out Veeam.com if you want to know more. differentdev.com. And Jonah, what's your website over there? Before I misquote it?
Cyberfortress.com.
I thought it was going to be that, but you never know. So I'm going to play us out with some fun, and tune in next time where we talk a little bit more about non-Veeam things. So, folks, I'm dancing my way out here.
Whether you're a seasoned solutionist or just starting out, the Rebel Devs podcast is a must listen. So join us. Comment, share, and subscribe. Be part of the Rebel Devs.